Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Almost lunchtime in Central Europe, and we are in our last panel for this morning, and we will talk about financing urban green infrastructure. And first of all, I'd like to present myself, just to say that also I'm very happy to participate as moderator in this amazing panel of speakers. I am the president of the Portuguese Association for Green Roofs and Walls, and also I'm the vice president of the EFB, the European Federation of Green Roofs and Walls Association. So I'm involved on these issues, the green infrastructure issues. Today and in this panel, we have an amazing panel of speakers. I think I will present them. Stephanie Lindeberg, Coordinator for Natural Capital Finance from European Investment Bank. Peter Berkowitz, Head of Unit for Smart and Sustainable Growth, Director General Regional Urban Policy from the European Commission. Stefan Richardson, Director Europe Regional Network from World Green Building Council, and Filipe Araújo, Deputy Mayor of Porto and Chair Environmental Forum from Eurocities. So I think it's really a very important panel to make this discussion. We will have a discussion with a duration of 60 minutes, and also you can use the Q&A Zoom tool to present some questions, and I will try to address to the speakers. So, just to start, as a warm-up, I would like to make just a short introduction, sharing a little bit of my vision and promoting the discussion on finance urban green infrastructure. As we all know, 2/3 of the world population will live in cities in 2050. So cities will grow, and obviously construction will increase. 85% to 90% of the existing buildings will be part of our cities in 2050. And so to achieve our goals on biodiversity and decarbonization, we will need to change something on our buildings. We also know that many cities have lack of space to improve parks and gardens. So we must look maybe to the buildings that we have on our cities. They have roofs, they have walls, so they can be green with nature. And we know 90% of roof space in Europe is still unused. So not forgetting other solutions for green infrastructure in cities, I would like very much to focus on the opportunity that buildings can give us to include nature and all the ecosystem services inside our cities. I would like very much to focus on simple questions, simple answers. Our European Commission, countries, government, municipalities can give incentives to green infrastructures, namely green roofs and green walls installation. How green infrastructure political promotion programs can match with financing programs. Also, as green infrastructures have public benefits, where owners and promoters can find financial incentives to add green roofs and walls to their projects. And so the idea is how we can move from planning and political tools to concrete actions on buildings. So let's start the discussion with a simple question that I would like very much you to develop. So could you name one economic and financial benefit to private and public sector of green infrastructure investments? Let's start with Stefan Richardson, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paulo, and good afternoon, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here. So, as Paulo said, I work for the World Green Building Council, representing a network of around 23 councils in Europe, membership of about 5,000 organizations. And Yeah, I think this is a really key topic and a great question to kick off with. In terms of benefits, the built environment is fundamental to the fabric of our societies, and we know more and more people moving into cities, so the urban landscape is really key to how humanity lives and thrives. And I think, just to keep it simple, there are some very basic benefits that increasing biodiversity, increasing access to green space has for people and for the planet, and it starts with simply our well-being. There are studies that have clearly demonstrated that access to green space, even just the visibility of green space, can reduce stress levels, and that's before we start to think about things like air quality. So there's clear social drivers for this, and also linked to those social drivers, there are clear economic drivers as well. So whether that's increases in productivity in workplaces, whether it's decreasing exposure to harmful particulate matter, pollutions, air quality, all of these have clear financial impacts as well. So I think it's a really clear case, and the evidence grows all the time to support the need for increasing the greening of our cities. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Stefan. Maybe we can move to Filipe Araújo. What is your perspective on the economic and financial benefits to the private and also to the public sector of these green infrastructure investments?
Hi, Paulo. Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here and saying hi to everyone that is participating. Well, I would say that to be concrete, well, in the private sector, I believe that on one hand, it increases the value of the property. Maybe with an example that I've been in Oslo for the Eurocities Environment Forum in 2019, a couple of months before the pandemic. And we have visited a new urban development area where the developers were required to integrate nature-based solutions in the urban plan. But first, they were very displeased by the requirement imposed by the local government for the area, because the investment and all the change in the business as usual. But now, when we were visit, they were asking for more because they realized that people were ready to pay more for the apartments just by this new green development, let's say. So in the private sector, I would say that it's the increase in the value of the property that I believe that we have now a more common understanding for the people that are ready to buy for this land. On the public sector, I would say that inspiring in the nature and taking advantage of the green and blue solutions to plan and to manage cities definitely can be much cheaper than an exclusively gray solution, let's say, because they have multiple benefits, and they can help, the green areas can help us solve complex and water drainage issues, for example, in the part of city, and at the same time, of course, promoting biodiversity, increasing people's well-being, as Stefan was mentioning, all the social part, but also improving the landscape. So we have been in Porto having quite good examples. For example, on one of the river that was one of the worst environmental problems that we had in Portugal. We regenerated all the area. We doubled the park from 9 to 20 acres or hectares, let's say. And what we have seen is that right now the population absorbed completely the area. They adopted the area. So now we have new ideas and new projects coming all around this area. But this has been very important for let's say, to improve the landscape, to increase the people's well-being, the social part. On the other area, we have been developing, for example, nature-based solutions on the Central Park, on the university campus, for example, that will help us to cope with the climate change, and especially to make it much more difficult to have floods in certain parts of the region. So this will definitely be a good way of, instead of putting new pipes and new things all around the city, with a simple park, we can help this and save a lot of money on the public sector. So just to give you two examples, on some concrete examples.
Okay, perfect. And I think you highlight a very important thing, that green infrastructure right now is part of the economic and the real estate investors right now, and they look to green infrastructures, green roofs, green walls as a part of the profit that they can have on investments. And yes, making the bridge to the investors, I think I should address to Stephanie Lindberg from the European Investment Bank the same question. What is your vision of the economic and financial benefits of all these green infrastructure investments? What is your perspective?
Dear Paulo, Stephanie hasn't joined yet. We're trying to
okay.
So for the moment, please continue with the rest of the panel.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So I will address the same question, but in a different perspective, to Peter Berkowitz, because yes, we all have a lot of curiosity to look at the tools that the European Commission can give us and can give to the cities and also to the countries to improve the green infrastructures in our cities. So what is your vision? And what do you think about the economic and financial benefits that green infrastructure can give to private and public sector?
Well, good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I can give you a perspective from, let's say, a European dimension of the problem. And I have to say, I agree very much with what Stephen and Filipe have said in terms of the benefits of green infrastructure. But I think from our perspective, what is particularly important is that green infrastructure offers a very cost-effective way of achieving many of our key policy objectives. And I mean, clearly, the first one of these is biodiversity. We have an EU biodiversity strategy, but also it offers the possibility to support other objectives. Which we have. I'm responsible for cohesion policy, which is an economic development policy, but we're trying to promote sustainable development and urban development at the same time. And in this context, because it hits several different policy targets or policy objectives, green infrastructure is very useful, whether we're talking about, we've heard pollution, whether we're talking about urban development, community involvement, rebalancing the distribution of activities in cities, achieving more sustainable growth. So it really is something which needs to be developed further. And we've actually signaled this as a priority for investment, whether in urban areas, but more generally in terms of trying to think systematically about where we can shift from grey to green.
Thank you very much. I think when we look to these solutions, and for many years we are already discussing these in congresses, and sometimes the feeling is that how we can move from the concepts, from the benefits that we all know, to the real building and the real construction and installation of these solutions. And it's obviously that a systematic integration of green roofs and walls in European cities will require a substantial financial investment, both from public and private sectors. So EU funds can provide a lever for those investments by providing a real signal for the market. So in your perspective, what are the main tools available right now that countries and municipalities can really use to achieve and to improve green infrastructures on cities? Filipe.
Well, I think what we have been doing so far is that well, we have been a long way in the city trying to promote green infrastructure. We have, I think it's not only about the funds that we have to leverage the investment. It's how we make things possible and how we can drive the private sector and also use the public sector to lead and give the example. We have been trying several things in Porto. I can say one good example is the project that we done with called the fifth facade. It's so like the roof part of what we can do with the roofs, and with this project we have identified all the green roofs in the city, and we put the theme on the agenda. And what we have seen is that after the public sector, the municipality, for example, launched, for example, the new intermodal station that is totally covered by green roofs, or other buildings that we sent, we saw that the private sector followed this trend. And now we have, although we had already several green roofs in the city that were not known by the people, we have shown that they exist, that they like it, because most of the time people didn't understand they were green roofs, they thought it were anything else. And now we have seen that the private sector has been following this trend. So, but this is not enough. This is just a small example. But we understand that it's a common, a bunch of things that we have to do. One other thing that we are doing is on the new master plan of the municipality is we are promoting a regulation that is called environmental index to apply to house developments and also to the building rehabilitations. So what we have done is that this in fact, we can offer something to the people that want to encourage the private developers to convey to a set of environmental measures in their projects, including the preservation of the green, the blue areas, the creation of new ones. And this index also considers the environmental risks in different areas of the city. So we are don't want things to be the same. We don't need green roofs in some areas where we already have a lot of biodiversity and green, but we need in other areas. So we are trying to promote, using this index, something that we can do. But when we come to the funds, we have to match these funds to this reality. So it's very important. Sometimes the projects don't start because they don't have the right way of finding financing schemes, or even if it's a bold and innovative action to find the correct EU funds to do it. To be honest, Porto is quite happy with the way we have tried a lot, and we have found a lot of funds to do, and we have several projects running in the city to build green roofs or to build nature-based solutions, some that I already told about. And we have found a lot of, for the public sector, funds to do these things. But I believe that we have to promote also in the private sector. So if we want to move very fast on these themes in the cities, and Paulo, in your introduction, you mentioned that we need to do it, there is no other way. And Europe has strict objectives on this. I think we have also to understand that the EU funds are in the next years will be definitely needed in order to accelerate this change.
And Filipe, just one more question connected with what you were saying. Is it's clear in your perspective, because you are part of the Eurocities, more than 190 European cities. Do you think it is clear for most of the cities in Europe how they can work with the European Commission, and how they can have and develop tools to finance green infrastructures in their cities? It is easy to achieve, and it is easy to make to design a program, a municipality program for the cities, or is something that it is not very clear how the European Commission will will address to the countries and the municipalities?
Well, we have been discussing this subject specifically with the European Commission, because, as you know, cities are the driver to the change. Yeah. If we want to do something regarding these subjects, they will be done in the cities. We know that this is the way forward. Cities have been promoting a lot, and they've been leading by the example. Even as you know, cities have even higher targets than the European Commission, some of the cities. So we have been pushing to move faster. And we understand that the way that the levels of government work, that the direct connection between cities and the European Commission and the programs that we have don't happen in the way as we would like, let's say. And we have been stressing this to the European Commission, that this connection between the European Commission and the city is most needed. Eurocities has been doing a lot of this and trying to facilitate this work. But we know, specifically, for example, when we are discussing the recovery plans right now, that the national governments didn't, most of the national governments didn't allow the cities to participate on the strategies. So we understand there is a problem that we have to face, but we also, at least in our perspective, we know that the European Commission understands very well the role of cities, and we have somehow to make this H 2020 or other programs that we had to finance the nature-based solutions or other programs that were so successful. Porto is implementing a lot of these projects. We have to escalate this, and we have to try to make this again, to accelerate if we want to achieve the objectives, and cities will be the drivers. So to answer your question is we are not there, and we know the level of governments between the Commission, national governments, and local or regional authorities is not the way we would like. We would like to be in a different position, but I think it's something that we have all to work in common, especially with these new funds that we have ahead.
Well, thank you very much, Filipe. And Peter, in the other part of this line, from the building to the municipality to the country to the European Commission. So, in your point of view, when you look in a position of the European Commission, what do you think countries and cities could help to make more effective and fast moves to achieve more green infrastructures in cities and more green buildings in Europe? I'm completely sure that the European Commission also have their difficulties to achieve, because we have different levels. We have the national levels, the municipality levels. So in your idea, in your perspective, what do you think could be some changes to drive this and to make this happen in a national and in the municipality level? Peter, I think you are mute.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect.
No, thank you. Well, the first thing to say is that money is not a problem. I mean, it's a strange thing to start with, but I think we have more funds available than ever. And Filipe mentioned the Recovery and Resilience Facility. We have a new programming period, and we have, I think, an extremely clear message from the Commission that we want to see more of this type of activity. And certainly we are passing the message at our level that we think green infrastructure is a priority for the reasons that we've discussed before. Therefore, the real question is what are the barriers?
Yeah.
And I think the key issue that we see from our perspective is the need to overcome these barriers very quickly. And then perhaps just to respond immediately to your point before going into what I see as some of the barriers, is one of the key ways forward is to strengthen the connections and the understanding and the linkages between our level and the level of the actors who are actually going to do it. And this is the cities and the municipalities. And this is an important issue, and it's a key principle of our policy. There are other policies where it's more challenging, but we are a regional policy, we're a regional and urban policy, and therefore our objective is to facilitate the cooperation between different layers. And there are a number of challenges, and I think this is what we have to work to at all levels together to address. I think the first is the issue of planning, and in particular, in this context, urban planning. And that within the processes of planning or spatial development, that these issues are integrated fully into this, that we're not just talking about projects, but we're talking about priorities for a city, for an urban area. The second thing, and it's very closely linked to this, is that that there is a need for thinking about systemic change. That these are not just isolated projects, but they're really for the transformation of a city, of an urban area. The third issue, which we see as a potential barrier, is community involvement. That often we see where cities are able to engage local communities in this work, they're able to build a stronger consensus around it. A big challenge is capacity. Now, in a place like Porto, clearly, I mean, there's a very strong capacity of the municipal or the city authorities to carry this process forward and play a leadership role. If we go to other parts of Europe, this capacity is not always there. And the question there is to see how we can foster this capacity and different ways of working, because it requires different ways of working. And then the question, the final one is the how do you get everybody pushing in the same direction? And we see this as well, where at the urban, the city and the municipal, and also in rural municipalities, the understanding of the approaches are often better developed than at a national level. And therefore, there's also a question of improving communication. So I think we see this as very much a collective task. In the context of our programs, the way to achieve this is through a proper dialogue and discussion between national, regional authorities and the actors who will deliver. And this is what we're pushing for. But I mean, you just have to push, discuss, and develop. And this is the only way to take things forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Stephen, what is your perspective from the World Green Building Council? You are a very important forum of discussion on these issues for many years, and you also obviously know the difficulties that the countries, municipality, European Commission have to address and to make it happen. What is your perspective? We all know the will is there, the money also is there. How we can do it? How we can achieve with the money to the promoters and the investors to make the cities greener?
Thanks, Paulo, and thank you to others for the great thoughts so far in the discussion. I think from our perspective, there are two things to mention. One is that green building councils, as you say, have been working on this topic for many years now. Many of the main market leading certification schemes that are typically run by our members give credits for biodiversity in various forms. So greening buildings, green infrastructure on sites has been credited and recognized in those schemes. And that has been one of the key things that I think has driven the awareness and the interest in solutions like green roofs and green walls and so forth. And I think as the evidence base is growing, which was one of the first points I mentioned about how the more data we have, the more the case becomes really clear that these solutions do have a really positive effect on a whole range of different factors. The more we will see that kind of interest increase. And I think the other thing is to look at the policy landscape and how that is driving things forward. So on the one hand, we have the work that the green building councils do through the voluntary certification schemes, which have a particular place in the market. They tend to drive the top end of the market, so market leaders who are looking to differentiate on their sustainability credentials. The certification schemes have been really powerful in driving on that end. But I think if we want to really drive mainstream action and sort of push these solutions, into the mainstream, that's where policies are really key. And I think there are two things to touch on there. One is obviously planning policy, and cities in many countries have quite a lot of autonomy there. They have authority to set planning policy, or at least develop local planning strategy, and so that's a really key way that cities can drive this by putting requirements in place. And we've seen great examples of that across Europe, and cities learning from each other. So some of you may be familiar with ideas like the biotope area factor or the green points system. These are schemes that cities have implemented, which are relatively straightforward to apply. There's not the need for very complex assessments, and I think that's really important to break down the barriers. Obviously, in some cases with high impact sites, it's necessary to do an environmental impact assessment, and then clearly the recommendations of a qualified ecologist can be looked at and taken on board, but that's not always implemented. It's not always necessary to do that level of assessment. So a more simple approach like these area factor methodologies helps drive uptake. And then the other thing to touch on is the EU taxonomy. Your question, I think, was what's there already to help drive this. The taxonomy is coming. We have the delegated acts on climate change mitigation and adaptation. The delegated act was released in April, so we've seen there already the do no significant harm criteria relating to biodiversity. And we, together with a number of the members of the EU platform on sustainable finance, are now working very hard to develop our recommendations for what will become a future delegated act, implementing a new part of the taxonomy on biodiversity. And for those not familiar with how the taxonomy works or will work, it has these 6 environmental objectives. So climate change, mitigation and adaptation are the first 2, and we already have the criteria for those. But then it will also have criteria for pollution, for water, for the circular economy, and for biodiversity. And at the disclosure level, so companies who are disclosing their alignment with the taxonomy, or investors disclosing their fund alignment with the taxonomy, for example, they can choose which of those 6 objectives they want to make a substantial contribution to. So when the criteria for biodiversity are finalized and that delegated act is available, we will see investors looking at that as an opportunity to push finance into into greening the built environment, and we're working on those criteria at the moment, trying to find a balance between the need for really strong ambition. The taxonomy needs to be science-based. That's one of the fundamental parts of the regulation, is it needs to be a science-based set of criteria, but obviously it needs to be usable by market actors as well. So we're looking at what criteria can we apply at the economic activity level for built assets, whether it's whether we're thinking about buildings or infrastructure. What criteria can we apply that will just increase the level of biodiversity? And clearly, green infrastructure plays a really critical role in that. So I think that the forthcoming delegated act, which we expect to be towards the end of this year, probably likely to be next year, will drive that. There's going to be a consultation on the criteria, so I really recommend all of you who are interested in this topic and have expertise, have a perspective on what the criteria for the built environment should be, do look out for that. It's likely to launch at the end of July and run through until the middle of September. So it's a great opportunity for all the experts in this network, in this audience, to input into how can the EU taxonomy drive investment for green infrastructure in cities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now again, looking a little bit to the future, Peter, what we can expect in the next decade? What are the priorities for the EU cohesion funds and national recovery plans?
Well, I think the priorities are pretty clear at a very high political level. It's the green and digital transitions, and that's where our big focus is on. I mean, the difference between us and the Recovery and Resilience Fund in particular is we are a structural policy. They are a response to a particular problem. Our focus is on less developed member states. Their focus is on those member states which are most affected by the crisis generated by the pandemic. And of course, then there's the governance. And we are a policy which is built very much on regions and cities. But the real question is, what do we want to achieve at a lower level in terms of contributing to the Green Deal? And there, I mean, our objectives are very much linked to the transition to climate neutrality. In this area, the biodiversity targets, but also ambitions in relation to pollution. And I think that what's important about green infrastructure is that it can contribute to all of these. And I think I think what is interesting in this discussion is seeing how green infrastructure can actually contribute to these very ambitious targets that we have. And at the same time to increase awareness of its contribution. So I think that is the issue. And I just want to come back to one thing that was triggered a little bit by what Stephen said. We think that we can be very ambitious, but the question is whether we are capable of delivering it. And what we need to do is to change the incentive structure. So we don't only want to achieve the objectives over the coming years, but we want to do it in a lasting way. So the incentives for the different actors involved in this process pushes them directly towards green infrastructure rather than the European Commission having to bring out policy messages. So I think that is what, in terms of our ambition for the next 10 years, and what we leave behind is a range of cities and municipalities across Europe who are able to deliver on these ambitious objectives, but also who have the capacity to take this forward on their own almost automatically.
Okay, thank you very much. And Filipe, in your vision, and as a person that is working on these issues for a long time, what is your perspective? What do you think in the next 10 years we can expect from the municipal level on Porto, but also in your perspective from the Eurocities? What do you think will happen on this issue in the next 10 years, and what do you think are the main drivers to achieve that goal?
Well, I'm an optimistic person, so I will put the because I believe in Europe and the way we are driving and leading the world in terms of this digital and green transition that Peter just mentioned, and all the problems associated with biodiversity, pollution, climate adaptation, etc. Let me just put just 2 or 3 things that I heard Peter and Stefan saying that I believe they are very, very important. Urban planning. This is the key. If we want to put all the biodiversity, all the environmental issues in the cities and in transforming in the next 10 years, we really need urban planning that is adopting the correct measures. And to me, as far as I've seen, it's still something that we have to work a lot, especially urban planning that has the data and the science-based way that Stefan was mentioned, that we that we can really solve concrete problems that we know that are happening in cities, where all these nature-based solutions and many other things can really drive and help the quality of life that we want always to achieve. Other thing that Peter said, it's pretty true, is that some cities have already huge management capability to drive this and to have new ideas to implement them. There are many other parts of Europe or regions or cities that cannot drive, and we have all to work in common. Eurocities is a platform to work a lot on this subject. But I believe that also the way that the Commission is putting most of the initiatives, that it's using partnerships between different cities, between different parts of Europe, and this networking is really helping to move and to accelerate many parts of different cities in these subjects. And so I believe this is something that we have really to stress in the next years, in order for where we are here all together discussing these subjects in 10 years from now. We can always see that we have a much greener cities, that we have much less pollution in the cities that we have right now. And the quality of life in 10 years is driven by this proximity to green and blue infrastructures, that we can have all the stakeholders of the market in common, in the same working the same path. So what I think Peter described it, I usually use the snowball effect. So we have to just push it. After we push it, we have to see the market and things moving, as we don't have to steer the snowball again. It's driving and has all the force, and it's increasing. And like I mentioned, in some of the projects that I've seen, we have already seen that in some of the green facade or the green roofs. As we know that the market has already achieved the planning to include it in their projects, and that's the way I've seen, and I think that's the way that we have to understand how we need to drive this transition.
Thank you, Filipe. Stefan, in your point of view, what do you think, looking for the next 10 years, what do you think will happen, and what are your concerns for the future?
That's a good
about
question.
green infrastructures, okay.
Yeah. So what will happen? Well, I think we, as I mentioned, we'll see the EU taxonomy come through with new criteria for biodiversity, which I think will really drive a much greater awareness amongst the financial community, the investor community, of how important this topic is and the opportunities. So we will start to see, in the same way that we're seeing, green bonds, which make reference to particularly to energy efficiency, and those green bonds and the demand for green bonds is pushing the availability and the demand for green mortgages, green loans that can be wrapped up into those green bonds. I think we will start to see some of the innovators in the market, and I think it's fair to say the financial market hasn't historically been the fastest to innovate, but I think there are actors there who are willing to try new things, and so we'll see some of them really exploring how they can use these criteria for biodiversity to offer green bonds that actually are perhaps biodiversity bonds, or I don't know what the terminology will be, but that are pushing and channeling investments into assets that have robust green infrastructure solutions integrated to them. So I think that's going to come in the next few years. In terms of my concerns, I think we're all aware of just how fragile the situation is at the moment, and how urgent it is that we tackle climate change. I think, and I'm certainly not the first to say this, the biodiversity challenge, if we can call it that, is at least as important to address as climate change. and the two are clearly very linked, but I think, you know, climate tends to dominate in our minds and in our political and public debates. So that's a concern that I have, that the biodiversity challenge, the threat to our ecosystem through biodiversity decline, biodiversity collapse, is really not getting the attention that it needs. And I hope that you know, things like the EU biodiversity strategy, you know, the strategies that we're seeing member states and other nations develop will be translated into real, you know, real solid legislation and you know, policy with teeth, if you like, not just strategies. A strategy is good, but we really need stronger legislation and regulation in this space, I think, to protect and to preserve and to regenerate what we've already lost. So yeah, those are some predictions and some concerns of mine.
Yeah, very good comments, because the urgency is to save us. It's not to save the planet. So we are saving us ourselves. And I think that perspective changed everything. And I think we all are running with a lack of time to solve many problems. But I think you put it in the right way, because biodiversity is completely, it is a serious problem connected with climate change. And that's why also I think solutions like green roofs and green walls that can again bring nature to town are so urgent and so important. And looking at this, we know that we have a lot of ecosystem services, a lot of services that can be provided from green roofs and green walls, water harvesting, so avoiding some flooding events, and other like pollution and so on. So do you think this should be also looked in a perspective of taxes? So if we have a building in a city that can contribute for public benefits, do the local authorities or the national authorities or the European Commission should look at this as we need to pay something for these services? We should pay something to make it happen.
I can give a quick response on that and let others come in as well. I think so. One of the things that we've been doing, where we've looked particularly at the renovation challenge, which for Europe is obviously a really major part of our climate change response. The key thing, I think, in overcoming this sort of systemic barriers to increasing renovation rates is really taking that holistic view. So looking at who stands to benefit from increased renovation rates. It's not just the homeowner or the building owner or the occupant. Clearly they are on the front line, but there are other co-benefits of increasing renovation into green buildings, and we can think about that in terms of energy, but we can also think about it in terms of biodiversity and green infrastructure. So what we're looking at is trying to scale the solutions where that holistic approach has been taken. So for example, there's a number of innovative schemes. There's an example in Ireland where different ministries are working together. So you've got the housing ministry and the health ministry working together to really unlock those co-benefits of renovation, and recognizing that both will stand to gain. That if by increasing energy efficiency, we can bring down some of the respiratory issues around leaky, inefficient buildings. So there are health savings to be had there. And I think the same applies for biodiversity. We need a much more joined up approach. And if we do that, then yes, I think there are opportunities to think about who stands to gain here, and how can we unlock those benefits and share the financial burdens around a bit more equitably, if you like. So I think taxation is one area to look at, whether it's on properties, on sales. That's definitely something that we can look at. But I think what we need to do is really sort of look at that kind of collaborative approach, sharing the costs and the benefits of this, And if we do that, then I think we'll start to see real success and real traction.
Thank you so much. Peter, your point of view on this issue, please.
Well, taxation, and in particular local taxation and planning, are really competences which are defined at the member state and the local level. So what we can do, particularly from my policy area, which is essentially a spending policy, is rather restricted. But I share very much with what Stefan was saying. There is a need for a better understanding of the costs and benefits, particularly for something like green infrastructure, where there are all kinds of spillovers from investment in green infrastructure, and also, there's a kind of, it's a bit technical there, but they're network externalities. The more green infrastructure you have in a place, the bigger the benefits you get. And this is something which is not always understood. And I think, therefore, from our perspective, what we can do is help support this process of better understanding the costs and benefits and the decisions that need to be taken. I mean, we have a big part of support to capacity building. And this can be a very, very important driver of change if people are able to not only to get the information about who bears the cost, who benefits, but actually better design policies. And there, I know, I mean, Filipe, both your organization and other city networks have been very, very active in exchanging on how you turn knowledge into policy in this area. And I think that we have to work, and there we can also support this, to disseminate this knowledge more, because this is an area where knowledge itself can often be a barrier.
Yeah, thank you very much. So it's also a pity that we don't have in the panel Stephanie Lindberg. I would like very much to see the vision of someone from the bank, bank.
Then I don't want to interrupt, but if I could stress just one thing that
yeah, sure.
mentioned about this, because I think it's irrelevant. I mentioned the effort that we are doing with this new master plan that we have right now at the city level that will lead the planning for the next 10 years. And one of the things that cities normally deal is when they are doing this planning or these policies is how to incorporate all these environmental benefits that we have been mentioning. How to do this? This is very, very difficult because we are talking about multidisciplinary team that has to be involved to address these many different topics that come from energy efficiency to bioclimatic measures to circularity of water to soil permeability to noise protection, many other things. And what we have been trying to do with this new environmental index, and I know there are other cities that already work on that, is how we can incorporate these environmental benefits in order for when we go to the taxation, we have the right incentives for the constructions or the buildings that we have to build now or rehabilitate to have the right measures for the specific place where they are developed. And here, I think the European Commission can help a lot because we need the data and we need most of the time, for example, data that come from satellites and from other things that can measure, for example, heat islands, then can help us to address health issues. That this is so multidisciplinary that we need a big effort in order then when it comes to the local level that we are solving the concrete problems that we have instead of having, I don't believe in a common, Porto has 42 square kilometers, okay? And in Porto, it's very small in area, we have totally different problems to address inside the city related with environment. And we can only do that when we have the right incentives put in place. So I think your question, sorry to interrupt, but your question was very well addressed because we will need the right incentives. It's the environmental index or others. I know many other cities are working in other things. And to accomplish that, to be honest, we are all still in, I think, in the beginning of this.
Thank you very much, Filipe. Very, very important comments. And so we have more 5 minutes, and so I think we can make a final round of comments. Maybe after all these important brainstorming, I would like to final remarks. Maybe we can start from the World Green Building Council. Stefan, what are your final remarks from this discussion?
Yeah, thank you, Paulo. Well, I think it's been a really interesting discussion, really great points raised. I think there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic that, that the financial solutions and the desire to really sort of increase the level of finance is there, and that there will be, there will be improvements in the situation even beyond what we've seen already. I wanted to pick up on a point that I've seen in one of the questions, and we've talked about this link between climate change and biodiversity, and these two challenges that kind of go hand in hand. And there's a question in the comments about the potential consequences of added green infrastructure for carbon and embodied carbon. And I think that just the point I want to close with is to say that when it comes to all of this, we believe that there needs to be a really holistic approach, and that's why we're really pushing for life cycle assessment to become mainstream, both in terms of what the industry does, but also through policy. And in that way, we will see the industry equipped with the tools to evaluate those kinds of trade-offs properly. I don't know if you can see on my background properly, we have a big campaign called Building Life, which is pushing that agenda very strongly with a big group of leaders at the European level to really put LCA at the heart of everything that we do for the built environment. And that, I think, is key to getting this right and doing it in a way that doesn't incur those trade-offs. So those are my final remarks. Thank you for a really informative session. Thank you to the other speakers.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Now the floor for Peter for your final remarks.
Yes, well, thank you. I think I just make one point, which is that there is a big opportunity now. I mean, there is three things coming together: an unprecedented amount of finance at both EU and national level. The second thing is a degree of political commitment. We have this earmarking for biodiversity in the multi-annual financing framework, which gives it visibility at the same level as expenditure on climate change. So a degree of political visibility. And the third thing is that there is a window of opportunity in terms of urban planning. I think the crisis has encouraged a real reflection in many cities about the sorts of cities that people want to live on. And I think the impetus towards greening has been greater than anything I've seen certainly in my professional career. But I don't think this will last forever. This window of opportunity as we move out of the pandemic, life will get back to normal. People will be focusing on other things. So I think this period that we have now of 1 to 2 years is an absolutely essential time to something to be seized and to make a big push. So thank you very much for the opportunity to participate, and also thank you to the other speakers. I found it absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. And I think you touched a very important point that it is really, we have a window of opportunity to really make this happen. I completely agree with you. I think this next 2 years will be fundamental to achieve important goals and put the things really working on the ground. Filipe, last words from you. Your final remarks and comments, please.
Well, first of all, it was a very good panel. Thank you very much. I think it's always very good to understand what many of us think about this subject. They are very, very important. I totally agree that we have a very short period to put things forward, and as they have to be mostly done in cities where most of the population lives. We know that we have in political agendas short times to implement. So usually these time frames of 2 to 4 years are the ones that we have to account with when we are discussing political agendas in the cities. So this one, sometimes it's difficult, sometimes it's the right opportunity to put in a time frame that that we all have to do things. I agree that we need, and I think cities have been leading, giving the example, which is good to promote this and to foster throughout the cities that we have. We have seen this in the networks, not only in the Eurocities, but other, the Covenant of Mayors or many others that are driving this change. We have to help and to push using the right financing schemes to achieve this. I have some concrete examples in Porto that are now in place in construction. They will be finished in a few months. But if we didn't have the finance approved from European funds directly or from national funds, I would say that the process would exist and probably would be done, but in a longer they won't be in construction right now. So we cannot think that everything is moving into place very well right now. I don't believe that. I think we have to continue to push the funds. That's more or less how Eurocities sees. And if we want to get to the objectives, we have to put every euro that we have right now in all the cohesion funds or the recovery and resiliency funds. We have to use these euros, every euro, in the green and digital transition. I think that's we have to be very, very, very stick to that. Otherwise, it will be very, very difficult in 10 years time frame to achieve the goals that we have proposed, and to have Europe leading as the leader in these themes across the world, having, as we believe, the quality of life that we all have that we want to give to our citizens.
Thank you, Filipe. Thank you, Stefan. Thank you, Peter. Thank you so much for taking your time to participate in this panel. I think it was very, very interesting. Thank you. And now we will close the morning session. Now it's time for a lunch break. We will come back at 2 p.m. Central European time for the afternoon panels of this amazing event. In the afternoon, we will have a panel called What's Up in Europe, News and Views from Across the European Union. We will have Green Infrastructure for Climate Adaptation, How to Improve Cities Resilience by Restoring the Natural Water Cycle. Very, very interesting. And let's design, the last one, let's design human-centered, healthy and sustainable cities just before the conclusions. So have a nice lunch break. Thank you very much again for the speakers of this panel, and see you soon in the afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paulo. Thank you, everybody.